So welcome everyone to the Dulye Leadership Experience Workshop, Win the Morning, Win the Day, how to use the first hour of your day to transform your life. Please note that the program is being recorded and will be available for subsequent viewing on the DLE YouTube channel. And please keep your microphones muted in the meantime during the presentation. So quick welcome and ground rules. My name is Nick Russo, a member of the DLE Programming Committee, and I'm based here in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, working as Senior Transportation Planner at the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. I'll be moderating today's workshop along with my fellow Programming Committee member, Dan Zabata. Dan is a Fire Control System Configuration Management Lead at General Dynamics Mission Systems and based in Dalton, Massachusetts. So to maximize everyone's learning experience, we have a few core DLE ground rules. First, please use the chat box for comments and questions that are topic related. Dan will be monitoring the chat and will surface your comments and questions to myself and our guest speaker, Karden Rabin, during the program. Every DLE program is an opportunity to grow your network as well. So in the spirit of making connections, we'd ask you to start out by typing your name, title, and organization or company in the chat and where you're located to introduce yourself to everyone. All right, thank you, everyone. It's great to see the diversity among our participants, and a special welcome to newcomers as well. It's another opportunity to broaden your network, and you may want to add a new colleague that you meet during tonight's program on your LinkedIn and stay connected, of course. And moving on with a few more ground rules, do your best to minimize distractions and stay focused. Make sure to have a pen and notepad handy to take any notes that are meaningful to you. And we always encourage active participation. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions to Karden after his presentation. Please put any questions in the chat throughout the workshop. We can field them at the end. And finally, please take a few minutes to provide your comments to the workshop feedback poll that you'll receive in a link at the conclusion of today's program. In appreciation for your feedback, we'll send you a link to a special meditation video created by Karden for his workshop. And with that, I'll introduce my co-host, Dan.
Thank you, Nick. Reminder for those of you just logging in, please type your name, title, company, or organization and your location into the chat box if you have not done so already. While you are introducing yourselves in the chat, please also take a few seconds to answer our live polling to kickstart Karden's session. Nicole, would you launch the 3 questions, please? Now on to welcoming Karden. Karden Rabin is the founder of Stress School and Boundless Integrative Wellness Center and a serial entrepreneur. He is a health and wellness expert specializing in stress-related disease and disorders. He is dedicated to helping people live productive and fully expressed lives without running their health and burning out in the process. Sorry, ruining their health, not running their health. Over the past decade, he has developed and led programming for the Wounded Warrior Project, volunteers in medicine in Starbucks, and has taught a Summit LA and the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. Welcome, Karden. We are so excited for your workshop today.
Thanks, Dan.
Here are the results of the live poll.
All right. 2/3 morning people. About half have practiced visualization, and apparently 7% are from the UK, and the rest are coffee drinking Americans. That's great. All right. So welcome, everyone. I really appreciate the DLE having me tonight to talk about winning the morning, winning the day, and how you can use the first hour of every day to not only achieve your goals, but in my opinion, and more importantly, really transform the entire quality of your life. So next slide, please. I'd like to give everyone a heads up about how we're going to walk through this. Believe it or not, before we actually get into what a morning practice looks like, we're going to talk about neuroplasticity. We're going to talk about how your brain learns and changes and the best ways of doing that. Then we're going to talk about the gift of disruption in how it relates to your brain and your habits and what you are doing by default in your life and what you'd like to be doing. And then we are going to go into really the person who created the concept that I'm going to be sharing mostly today, which is Hal Elrod and his conception of the miracle morning. And then we're going to talk about how to do it. And last but not least, we'll have some, a Q&A to see if I can provide any more wisdom and counsel. Next slide, please. So neuroplasticity is the ability of neural networks in the brain to change through growth and reorganization. And I presume that most people have heard of neuroplasticity before, but to put it in even more layman's terms, the gray matter inside your skull is not made of bone or concrete. It's a very malleable, in fact, electrochemical fabric. And it's a remarkable fabric that is capable of a huge amount of learning, a huge amount of habit and behavior execution, but also using the right approach, it's very malleable and very, very changeable. And that's what we're going to be harnessing today, sort of through the Miracle Morning practice. That's how the Miracle Morning accomplishes what it does. Next slide, please. So one of the most famous researchers in neuroscience, a guy named Donald Hebb, coined the phrase that nerves that fire together wire together. And it simply means that your synaptic structures, your neurons, which are strings of cells, right? As those strings of neurons get repeatedly enacted in the brain, they start to wire together. And it's still not to say that they become permanent, although some of them are pretty fixed. They just become fixed because of how much they've been used. Sort of like if we have a trail in the woods, that's been walked over hundreds of times, thousands of times, hundreds of thousands of times, starts to become a very established feature of the landscape, whereas new ones take a bunch of bushwhacking. Next slide, please. So the brain forms habits by firing these neural patterns over and over again. But why does the brain do it? Why do habits happen? Well, any neurological function, from thought patterns, literally the way you think about the world, to physical activities, driving to work, juggling, if repeated enough, get wired as a habit in the brain. And the brain is obsessed with efficiency. It wants to automate any function it can. And once automated, it will execute it with or without your conscious attention, whether you like it or not. And I think one of the most classic examples of this, speaking of driving to work, is if you have your morning routine, such as it is, the habit starts, right? You drink your coffee, you have your bite of toast, you leave the door, you go out the door, you get in your car, and normally you go to work. But this morning you wanted to, let's say, drop something off at the post office first. How many times have we wanted to do that, but completely, once we started driving, not made the turn to the post office and instead did the drive to work, right? That's how powerful these habits are, and the brain wants to automate them. Next slide, please. So there are actually, Ida Tarbell is one of the most famous muckraking journalists of all time, early 20th century. And she's famous for saying that life is but a collection of habits. And I would like to add, so are you. Most of our day, most of our interactions, even most of our thoughts are a collection of habit on repeat. Another example of this is when you go home for like a family dinner, before even going to the dinner, you could probably write out the script of the evening. You know what dad's going to say, and when dad says that, you know what your sister's going to say, your dad, and your mom's going to jump in, she's going to support your sister. Like, the sitcom, you know how it's going to go. And I'm not saying that we're all a bunch of automatons, but I kind of am saying that we are a bunch of automatons. And so one of our goals here is to start actually taking control, such as it is, of those automatic aspects of ourselves, of those habits, of those routines, and using the principle of neuroplasticity to make those things work for us rather than against us. Next slide, please. So speaking of working, I got ahead of myself. Are your habits working for you or against you? How often are you consciously making choices about your life versus how often habit and routine are making choices for you, just executing the day, executing the response? And then another important question is that because most of you have a little bit of self-awareness and consciousness, when you do try to change a part of yourself, a habit of yourself, a personality aspect, how often are your efforts at change successful? Most of us have found, we're going to keep, by the way, like addiction out of this. Like we're not going to talk about cigarettes or alcohol or even maybe like sugar addiction right now, because they're a slightly different type of habit, but they are subject to the same principles. But how many just like typical habits, personality traits, modes of being have you tried to change and not been successful with? And I think we can all raise our hands and say quite a bit. It's frustrating. Next slide, please. So how do you break out of your life being an endless Groundhog Day of habits being repeated over and over again? And how do we do that in such a way that we don't fail and get frustrated? Well, next slide, please. Disruption, 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 disruption. Disruption is the necessary ingredient that precludes change, right? Out in Silicon Valley and in lots of entrepreneurial sectors, everything's about disruption, right? Uber disrupted cabs, right? I can go on and on. You know, delivery services. The internet's trying to disrupt everything. Well, let's bring that down to the world in our lives, right? I have an example here. You know, most of you are aware, this is a professional setting that we're in right now, that we're in the midst of something called the Great Resignation. There's never been a larger retreat of people from the workforce ever, even people in good, well-paying jobs. And why is this happening? Well, the most disruptive thing to happen to planet Earth since World War II just happened. It's called the coronavirus. And it interrupted habit. It interrupted synaptic pathways. It interrupted routine on a global level, a cultural level, a national level, a local level, and a highly personal level. And it's changing people's behavior. It's giving them an opportunity to actually reflect on their lives, what's important and what's not, rather than being caught up in the momentum of their own habits and routines. So we have to use this same principle. Next slide, please. To really make change in your life, you must disrupt habits that are not serving you and repeatedly practice new ones to replace them. Nerves that fire together wire together. So we interrupt the firing, and then we, through repetition, and at first repetition does take some will and discipline, although there are tricks to make it easier, we start to wire together new synaptic patterns. Next slide, please. So the best time to take on this practice, as illustrated by Hal Elrod, is in the morning immediately after waking up. And the reason is that the momentum of the habits that constitute you are yet to be set in motion, and they're most malleable. Now, there are lots of us that are instantly into habit, right? We wake up, we look at our phone, we get to, we're completely into work. We never even had a moment of being conscious or intentional. We went right here. And the whole day is hijacked into basically reaction, habit, routine. So we want to harness this first part of the day before we get into that to start establishing and prioritizing things that are really important to us and the habits that we want to develop. Next slide, please. So the origins of the miracle morning happened when Hal Elrod, who is kind of obsessed with improving life, what he went and did is he interviewed hundreds of the most successful people he could get his hands on. And like lots of folks, like the seven habits of highly successful people, he collected data on what the most common habits were of these successful people. And he came away with 6 habits. And then his kind of particularly unique contribution was to then say, F it, I'm going to super stack these 6 habits and do all of them first thing in the morning and see what happens. And the results of his experiment turned into a global movement of Miracle Morning participants. I had the pleasure last year for almost 6 months, I was a daily contributor to the Miracle Morning group on Clubhouse, where we would continually discuss and help people with their Miracle Morning practices with hundreds of people on that Clubhouse call all the time. And so it was a pleasure to be part of that movement, and that's why I continue to share it. We'll go to the next slide. What are the habits that we are super stacking? Hal came up with a clever acronym called the SAVERS. And the SAVERS are, click please. The first is silence. And silence, besides being quiet, right? Not getting out of bed and getting on our phone, talking to people, whatever, is we just maintain silence, quietude. That's its absolute base. Silence also can be mindfulness practice. It could be a mindful movement practice. It could be meditation. It could be a guided experience. It could simply be the act of reflection, of creative thinking, as opposed to list doing, right? So sitting in silence, but in your head thinking about all the things you have to do today is not a use of silence. But that's what silence is. Next, please. The A stands for affirmations. And affirmations, such as they are, believe it or not, affirmations inside a neuroplastic context, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy is based on as we reform thoughts and conversations in our head, we affect our brain and therefore our emotional system as well. So the second part of the SAVERS are affirmations, using language that support new habits, new goals, new visions. Next. V is visualization. This could be, probably there being in the middle, one of the most powerful techniques. Visualization is a way of taking neuroplasticity to another level because it enrolls many more parts of the brain into the thing that you're trying to habituate, achieve, or realize in your life. By the way, just pro tip, affirmations plus visualizations plus embodiment, which means feeling the effects of your affirmations and visualizations physically in your body, involves the entire brain and really is a supercharging habit creating method. Next, please. Exercise. So in this practice, some kind of movement. It doesn't necessarily, you'll see later, it doesn't have to be like your full fitness routine in the first hour of the day, but some kind of movement that activates the physicality of the body. Next. R is for reading, and specifically for reading inspirational text. This is not for reading emails. This is not for reading the news. This is for reading biography. This is for reading stuff that's spiritual. This might be for reading something inspirational in terms of business or educational. It should be uplifting and enriching, not just informing. And next. Okay, scribing. Scribing is an ancient term for journaling, and they said scribing instead of journaling because savor sounds better than savor J, right? But the act of journaling, of writing down the things that you want to achieve, writing down the person you want to be, writing down maybe reflections that came up, creative ideas, out of your silence practice or your visualization practice, writing down your feelings. It can be anything. It's very open-ended, but it is a creative and self-reflective process. So these are the elements that consist of a miracle morning practice: silence, affirmations, visualizations, exercise, reading, and scribing. By the way, other than silence being the way we go into our morning, there's no particular order to the way these need to be done. And we'll keep going. Next slide, please. So before we get into the how, before we get into the recipe of the way this is done, I think it's Simon Sinek that says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? So what is the why behind why you might want to commit to this practice? Is it to have a more positive headspace, more awareness of your body and emotions, to accomplish a professional goal, to tap into your creativity? Is it simply to have time, carving out time for self-inquiry, for being with you? What does that mean? Is it brainstorming on life, right? How many times do we wish we just had time to think about what we'd like to do? How valuable would that be in and of itself? Or might it be like something like finding a relationship? Click, please. So it's not just about thinking, right? Bruce Lee is famous for saying, don't think, feel, right? What is not only the thing you what are you thinking about, but what inside you actually makes you feel driven or drawn, moved to do it. Because when you can add emotional content to what your cognition is trying to accomplish, there's much more enrollment in what you're trying to do for yourself. Next slide, please. So now on to brass tacks. How to do it. The first thing is, preparation is everything, especially prepare the night before. I was reviewing some of the questions before we started this evening, and one of them was like, how do you get motivated to get out of bed on like a cold morning when it's dark out in the winter, right? And for those of us who live in the Northeast or the Berkshires, etc., we know what that's like. A lot of it has to do with preparation the night before, and I say to you, don't think about, although motivation is nice, think about what keeps you in bed, right? So there's not only motivation, but there's things that are restricting you. So for me, by the way, just, a little TMI here, historically, I don't sleep in pajamas. Aha, but in the winter, when I want to do my miracle morning, I sleep in pajamas and I have my slippers next to the bed. Because the main reason why I don't want to get out of bed is because I'm cold, right? So not only do I keep myself warm, have my slippers ready, I have my smart thermostat go on when it's supposed to. And for the person who said, when it's dark out, a remarkable investment can be one of those lovely alarm clocks that gently starts to illuminate about a half an hour before you want to wake up. They don't even need to make noise. And that can completely remove one of the obstacles out of your way, right? So prepare the night before. It could be what I'm talking about, having a glass of water ready, right? Having your alone or your phone far away from you so that thing's not going to be in your way. Maybe having your tea or coffee set up and ready to go. So my point here is that preparation, and first think, what's in my way of doing my miracle morning, right? And then the second is like, what's my why? So classically, we wake up 1 hour earlier than you normally would. And then, I wrote here, let nothing interrupt you. You want to try to transition into wakefulness, stay and kind of hold on to that aura of silence and ease. And if you find your head being like, I should check my phone, you'd be like, no, one foot in front of the other. I want to listen to a podcast while I'm brushing my teeth. No, just brush your bloody teeth. All right, and then flow into your practice. Now, classically in the practice, we do each savor for 10 minutes. And then, if you're really committed to the practice, we say repeat this for a minimum of 30 days. There is a wide range of opinion on how long it starts to take or form a habit. It's like 30 to 90 or so forth. But if you can do this thing, I think within 14 days, the morning momentum happens and you start to look forward to it. But if you can do it for 30 days, it's going to be imprinted in you. You're going to miss it when you don't do it. Now, in the Miracle Morning community, we also have a saying, never miss a day twice. You can miss a day, but don't let missing a day become 3 days or 4 days or 10 days. So always come back to it. So that's the main structure of simply how to do a Miracle Morning practice. Next slide, please. Now, here's an example of my Miracle Morning to show you, because this can be customized to really fit what you want to do. So I wake up, I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, and I get a glass of water. And then I do the exercise portion first because I'm kind of, even though I'm a morning person, I'm kind of groggy, and also my body's a little stiff. So I do 5 to 10 minutes of sun salutations. Sometimes I do jumping jacks, sometimes I do burpees, but I do some kind of mindful movements first to wake up my body. Then, and I did all of this silently, then I transition into a seated mindfulness practice. And sometimes my first intention is to go into that practice and just purely meditate for 10 to 20 minutes. This would be a time where if you get good phone discipline, if you want to use Headspace or Insight Timer, if you want to have a guided meditation, I think there's also one being provided for you by me at the end. You're welcome to listen to something like that. It can also be the time to just be with yourself, to just be quiet and be like, what are some of the big questions I've been wanting to think about? Like, where do I want to go on vacation? What goals do I actually have? What hobbies do I want to pursue? And sometimes that seated mindfulness moment, that silence, in being reflective, you also have your journal with you, and you're kind of oscillated between this silent contemplative mode and this note-taking mode. Like, I know that sounds, I don't know if that sounds simple to you, but like, when is the last time, without it being about productivity or work, you gave yourself space to just think about your wants, to think about yourself, to collect them on paper, to make them an important part of your life? After my seated mindfulness, I then move into my affirmations and my visualizations, right? Affirmations for me might be something like, focus and clarity are my natural state. And then I feel focus and clarity in my body. I might visualize myself being at my desk later. And what does focus and clarity look like? It might be like, I got my Bose headphones on, my binaural beats, right? My phone's on airplane mode, right? I'm visualizing the state that I'm trying to affirm later, right? For a while, because I'm a recovering people pleaser, one of my affirmations was, I say no before yes. That's it. I say no before yes. And then I would visualize myself later in the day having someone ask me to do something for them. And I'd be like, Cindy, I'd like to help you with that. Can I get back to you in 24 hours? Right? No before yes. I'm not saying yes. So your Miracle Morning practice can also be used to reform behaviors. This is how creative we can get. And then at the end, I would usually do some scribing, right? Either some things that came to me out of my seated mindfulness practice, maybe some affirmations new affirmations that came to me that I thought would be useful. And then reading just 5 minutes, maybe a poem, maybe a quote, maybe one page from an easy book that I'm reading. But you'll see in the asterisks, the asteri, I wrote up at the top that I do my actual fitness later. So I do not make a fitness practice part of my Miracle Morning. I do it before or after or another time. I'm just doing some movement. And then the reading part, I also do most of my reading in the evening. So I'm not trying to get a ton of reading in during my MM practice. But most importantly, we're giving you the rubric, the savers, when to do it, how to do it, and then to make it yours. So, we put up here, is there a small change you're inspired to make? In Hal Elrod's approach, he even has what's called a 6-minute Miracle Morning. You just get up, you spend 1 minute kind of in silence. That silence could be nothing. That silence could be prayer. That silence could just be like listening to the sounds of nature. It's just silence. And then one affirmation that's meaningful to you. One moment of maybe visualizing your day or how a meeting's going to go, right? Maybe you're doing push-ups or lunges or whatever for 1 minute, and so on, right? Journaling for 1 second, like, I'm awesome and I'm going to crush it today, or I want to, whatever you're writing down. And then again, the reading could be a quote or a momentary poem. So you can do a mini miracle morning, or you could start with, what is the small change through what we've been talking about that you think would make a really big difference if you could just do maybe one of these savers. And next slide. So, to use Hal Elrod's words, I invite you to let today be the day that you give up who you've been for who you can become. And it's rooted, guys, in understanding how your brain works, in understanding that we have to disrupt the habits and routines that constitute most of who we are. And then we have to use practices of commitment, intention, repetition to start to forge the new ones that are desirable. And then the best part is when you commit to those for a certain amount of time, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, they become habits with their own momentum, and you don't have to do the work anymore. So that's what's possible. And I hope that this presentation kind of lit some fire, inspiration, some possibility for you. And I'm going to look forward. I know we have questions that I'm going to answer and some Q&A as well. And you can always dive deeper into this simply by Googling Hal Elrod and the Miracle Morning. You can get the book. You can join the clubhouse. There's quick start guides. So if you're someone who really likes form and instructions, that would be a great way to dive into it. And that'll complete the presentation part for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Karden. And we're going to move quickly to questions. And we received many advanced questions during registration. So let's review some of them now. First, is it preferable to wake up at the same time every day, or to get 8 hours of sleep no matter what?
That's a very good question. All of the evidence says it is important to wake up. If you want to create a consistency, both in your sleep pattern and your circadian rhythm, and your morning routine, waking up at the same time is universally important. That being said, I don't like the idea that it has to be a compromise between waking up at a certain time and getting 8 hours of sleep. What do you have to change on the back end, on the evening sides of things, so that you can have the best of both worlds? So you can wake up at the consistent time you'd like to wake up, as well as getting the sleep you need. And if you're in a situation where you're going to bed late, once or twice and waking up at your time, like you're basically in a very short-term sleep deficit, that's fine. You'll recover from that. But doing that over and over again is not a good idea. And if you have to choose between waking up at a certain time and getting sleep, like you're just stuck, your sleep is the most important thing. So don't commit to a certain time of waking up unless you can sleep healthfully that way.
How can I reset my internal clock if need be?
There's a lot of ways. The basic way of doing that is you have to commit to waking up at a certain time, not the bedtime, waking up at a certain time for a continuous period of time. And then your circadian rhythms should naturally start to follow that wake up time, and you should be getting tired in the evening. The other part of that is sleep hygiene in the evening. And sleep hygiene in the evening is really in the hour to 90 minutes before, when you do want to go to bed, stop doing stimulating shit, right? So no blue light, no TVs, no phones, no iPads. You got to get analog and old school, dim the lights. You have to, you are still, I always like to say, you're a human being, all right? This is that cortex, duct taped to a child, that's your emotional brain, bolted to a horse. You're still an animal. Huge amounts of your brain are animal, right? And so really what you're trying to do is you're trying to tap into the natural sleep rhythms that are part of your biology. and make both the evening and the morning tie into that. So consistent wake up time is most critical, and optimizing sleep hygiene in the evening.
I like that, sleep hygiene. I'm
You
definitely gonna
can
keep that in
Google it.
mind.
Yeah, Google that.
And you kind of already touched on this during the presentation, but if you have any more info to share about motivation to get out of bed in the winter when it's cold and dark outside, feel free to add it in now.
Yeah, I'll lean back on what I say. It's the motivation. I really focus on what demotivates you first. And again, that whether it be the cold or the dark, and solve for those, right? With pajamas, slippers, smart thermostat, a light that glows. It'll make a world of difference. And then the other thing is, things like moving your alarm clock further away from you that make you get up. But it's often if you can push past that resistance in the first 30 seconds, you just get past that first bit of resistance. You just get yourself out of bed and get the toothbrush in your mouth, and the rest is gravy.
Awesome. And I thought of a question while we were going through now, so I'm going to ask it since I'm the host. I usually, when I get up, I'm already hungry, and sometimes my stomach will even start growling, and it would be distracting if I'm trying to even meditate or be silent. Do you think eating can be part of the miracle morning, or should I hold off till after?
No, that's a good question. And that's so, as what I would say is maintain silence and make whatever initial meal you're having, whether it's your full breakfast meal or just like kind of an amuse-bouche to hold you off, make it ritualistic, right? That it's about being quiet. It's about being with self. That maybe like whether it's making the toast or the smoothie, that you're just staying in the flow of being in the present, right? Like what would kind of like how would a Zen samurai make his toast before his miracle morning?
Okay, I like it. So let's see. I'll check with Dan to see if there's any questions that came through during the chat that we'd like to bring up now.
Yep, I got
Anything from you, Dan?
Yeah, I got 4. So the
Great.
first one I got is from Valerie. She said, per 2 brain experts that she's previously interviewed, dancing and physically crossing your own midpoint and foreign language learning are 2 of the best ways to enhance neuroplasticity and creating new wiring. Might these activities in turn make humans more able to embrace disruption? And is there a relationship?
So moving across midline is a good way of also getting 2 sides of the hemispheres of the brain to communicate. So that might be part of why those scientists, or is it scientists that were interviewed or just researchers? And the second thing is, yes, like essentially novel experience is disruptive, right? So novel learning, novel traveling, that's why people have revelatory experiences when they're traveling, because all of their routines, their habits that are cued by their environment are gone. So novelty, whether it be language or dance or new activities or movement or travel, all of those things are disruptive, and all of those demand the brain to interpret information and do things differently. As for dancing and foreign language supporting disruption, I'd simply say they are disruption.
All right. Next question is from Tom Bernard. Is there or can there be a connection between scribing and dream process?
That's a good question, and it is not my area of expertise. So I know a lot of people who do keep a dream journal, and they wake up and they write down, because guys, when you wake up and you, even half an hour later, try to tell your dream to your friend or something, it's like slipped through your fingers. So this act of capturing it immediately, but it's just something that I know of that process, but it's not something that I've practiced. And I mean, it's your miracle morning, my man. You can do what you want.
Okay, this one's from Kaylee. Karden, we need some tips on how to replace the snooze habit.
Yeah. So the snooze habit, this is partly taking stuff that's taking away stuff that demotivates you. It's also putting things that motivate you. And then also the simple action of like, let's put it this way. Almost all of us have a relationship to our alarm that we've developed since we had to go to school that looks like this. This is my little Yoda, right? Imagine that was my alarm. Bam, bam, fuck. Bam, bam, God damn it. And then it's God damn it, and it's also we roll away from it, right? And then maybe we put our hand over our head or a pillow over our head to somehow insulate us against the next hit of the alarm. So consider that not only do you have the snooze habit, your alarm is actually a cue to not wake up. Okay, people? So use a different device to wake you up, and you might have a much different response. So if we remove the things that are interrupting us, and we have some motivation, and then we change the cue from or whatever your dumb alarm sound is, what happens if not only do we move it away from us, right? Okay, we want to be able to get out of bed. What happens if, and what happens if you make it a completely novel sound? What if you make it a more friendly sound? What if you move around from sound entirely and talk about what I was talking about with a bright light? And it might be something that then draws you out of bed because it doesn't have the same associations with God damn it, God damn it. So that's my advice is remove what's demotivating you, remember what's motivating you, move the alarm somewhere else, and completely change what the alarm is so that it's not associated with off sleep.
And well, thanks for that. One more is from Nick. Something tough for him is living in a dense area that the world around him isn't silent. Any tips to beat that?
Well, I'm sorry, my friend, it doesn't have to be. I didn't tell you the world has to be silent. You have to be silent. So it's not about, it's about, silence is an effort to prevent your mental train from leaving the station in the morning, right? Because most of us get out of bed, and whether it be cued by the phone or cued by our own head immediately going into, what should I do today? What do I have to do today? Let me go into my to-do list. You've conditioned yourself in the morning to completely bypass reflection and intention and go right into basically productivity and reactivity. So silence is about mental quietude and presence, not necessarily external quiet. That being said, if you're distracted by your external quiet, well then get a pair of noise canceling headphones and slide them on the moment you get out of bed, and maybe put on some ambient stuff that helps you stay in that floaty zone.
Awesome. Thanks,
Yeah.
Karden. And for me, I found for the snooze cycle, I have to change my alarm tone every few months, or else I start resenting it and then tune it out. So that helps too, I think.
That is really smart. I mean, dude, I love that. Think about how most of us, our reaction to our text message ding or whatever sound is it's basically bee sting, what is it now? What is it now? Right? And then you change your tone, you change the sound, and at least for a couple weeks or months, it's not quite as debilitatingly stimulating. Yeah, that's good, Nick.
Yeah. And then we have a few more advanced questions that came in from registrants as well.
Sure.
Let's see. Do you suggest using the same affirmation for multiple days, or choosing a new one for each day or a situation that's going to happen that day?
Good question. So Little deep dive into affirmations for a second, folks. Affirmations that are said but not felt don't work. They're skin deep. So an affirmation is meant to create an emotional and then embodied resonance, right? So if I say, clarity and focus are my natural state, well, great, I just said that. But if I say calm and focus are my natural state, and then maybe I think about like a still pool of water or pond, or I think of myself at my desk, not like this, but like that. And then I feel in my body calm and focus. That is actual neuroplastic practice. Now we're involving a whole lot of the gray matter, the neocortex, the visual cortex, the cerebellum in terms of how we physically feel, a lot of parts of the brain are coming online in that affirmation. So now I've said that about affirmations. Affirmations are a tool for generating and summoning state, behavior, ability. And you should be using your affirmations until you are finding that your affirmations are creating new state, behavior, and ability. And then from then, once that affirmation has accomplished its goal, whether that be days or weeks or months, you kind of keep it in your affirmation hocus pocus magic box, because what the affirmation becomes is it becomes what we call an NLP, an anchor, right? So a trigger is when you get an email from your boss that says, why is this late? That's a trigger that makes you dysregulate and freak out, okay? And get in a hyper work mode. An anchor is the opposite. An anchor is a trigger that creates a regulated or useful state, right? So if you practice, I am calm and focused for a while, clarity and focus is my natural state, and you know how to feel it, and then it's just there for you. When you get dysregulated, you can be like, oh wait, I have this affirmation. Calm and focus are my natural state, and the anchor generates a neural cascade. So that being said, you use an affirmation so you feel like it's accomplished the goal you want it to accomplish, and then you move on. And affirmations can be used and tried on and exchanged to suit what you're trying to accomplish in any given moment, day, or period of time.
Awesome. And this might be a question that helps me too. What are some quick ways to energize yourself without depending on coffee or other consumables?
Got it. No one likes this answer, but the 5 to 8 minute cat nap is a superpower. Not only for energy, but it usually resets your stress and your mental state. It's amazing what can come from a 5 to 8 minute cat nap. You're like, I don't have 5 to 8 minutes. Well, if you actually look at the amount of time it takes you to go get coffee and come back, it's usually 5 to 8 minutes. So it could be longer. Your coffee break could take 15 to 20 minutes. Now, granted, you like it because I'm going to get away from work for a minute. I'm going to go walk over here. So the cat nap is a superpower. And then I actually think anything that can energize the legs, a walk, squats, and then last but not least, a breathing like Kapalabhati breathing, which is skull polishing breath from yoga, more of a heightened breath can usually move some energy up and wake you up. So the cat nap, anything that pumps blood from the legs to the brain, so squats, lunges. By the way, even you don't have to jump with your legs, just the calves can pump a ton of blood back to the head, and then kind of a rapid breath style. Those would be the 3 that I'd go with.
Awesome. How can I prioritize every single day as demands change?
Well, first, if you're in an organization, you should be bringing at least, besides personal responsibility, I would want the people that I work for to be clear about what priorities are. Furthermore, just so you know, priority only became a plural word like 50 years ago. It used to be priority because priority means that which becomes before, right? And so it's a contradiction in terms to have multiple priorities. So no offense to your organizations that have 10 priorities, that doesn't make any sense, okay? You should have one priority because it's that which comes before. So one, I would look to leadership for for support in informing you about what priorities are. And then, in your own world, there's multiple ways to look at this. Someone help me here. What's that grid of urgent, non-urgent, important, not important? What's that thing called again? Come on, guys. Anyway, there's a grid. And the grid is there's the urgent line and the important line. And so there's 4 categories. It's a matrix. Thank you. But and there's the things you want to be doing the least of are non-important urgent things, right? Important urgent is obviously something that you want to do, but if that's even in second, first place is you want to be doing important non-urgent things first. That the most productive people are doing important things non-urgently. The next level down is urgent important. Then after that is urgent non-important. You don't want to be doing any of that. Hold on, there's one part of the grid that I'm missing. Urgent important, urgent important. Yeah, my point. Just Google the matrix, and you can then put the things that are on your workload into that matrix. And you really want to work in your life on removing non-urgent. So non-urgent unimportant is clearly the last thing. That's the last thing. Non-urgent unimportant. But that is a nice way of organizing priorities, looking to leadership. And another thing that I like to say is almost nothing in life is as important as we think it is. And it can usually wait a day. So that's what I would say on that.
Kelly said in the chat, it's probably called the Eisenhower matrix.
That's right. Thank you.
Knew we'd find it. And what else? So, what are effective strategies for transforming intentions into habits?
The miracle morning.
All right.
Like,
There we go.
Right? The miracle morning. So, it depends on what an intention is, but you need an intention and then visualization of how that's going to be executed, right? Like, I'd like to exercise. Well, right? Then we need to start visualizing and formulating how we can get that exercise practice in place. And then you need to do it. If you're bad at self-motivation, get an accountability buddy, do it with someone else. It's remarkable what we're willing to do for someone else, but not for ourselves, right? But the way we move intentions into habits is turning them into visualizations and then actions. And then we have to repeat them a lot.
Awesome. All right, so we've got one more from advanced questions, and then I wanted to address Fran's question as well in the chat that came up as we were talking. So the last advanced question is pretty open-ended. What is the most impactful thing I can do? I think in terms of getting this habit started of the miracle morning, I would assume, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. So if in terms of it's the miracle morning, it's, I don't like giving dumb answers, but Nike's kind of correct. You have to just do it. You have to just do the thing and use your intelligence to see what's demotivating me. That's really where you got to stop. What's demotivating me? What motivates me? How does accountability help me? So the most impactful thing you can do is hack into how you can start doing the thing. If in terms of the questions what's the most impactful thing I can do in the morning? The super stack is really useful. I've spent a lot of my time just trying exercise or just trying mindfulness, and they're all nice, but nothing has ever worked better than the super stack, meaning the savers. So the most impactful thing you can do is what we taught today.
Awesome. Thanks, Karden. And then I'm just going to hand it back over to Dan, who had one more question from the chat.
Yeah, so Karden, Francine had one great question. What's the first thing you should do after you execute savers?
Ooh.
I think I said that right.
Yeah,
Question.
yeah, after you've completed your set. Actually, let me tune into my practice for a second. I'd say two things. One is to pause for a moment and literally just notice your mind and your body and like, do I feel different now than when I don't do this? Do I feel different now than when I started? What do I feel like? What is the me that's present, right? The new collection of habits after I've done my miracle morning. So one is just a check-in. There's a satisfaction. There's a different kind of you that comes out of those 60 minutes. And the second thing is you've just done the work. You've actually done something that we call in neuroscience, you've done something called priming. The priming of what you did in the morning in terms of affirmations, visualizations, what you want to accomplish that day, how you want to interact with people, how you want to feel, right? That priming has started to put these anchors in place. And so just get on with your day, but also notice if multiple days of after a week or 2 or 3 of the miracle morning, really reflect if your days are going differently, if how you're performing in those days are going differently. And I wouldn't micromanage it, but like, have I moved closer to a goal? Has something at work become easier that was harder? So immediately after, just reflect on how you're doing, how you're feeling in that moment, and then go about your day and see what the kind of cascading impact of your practice looks like in your life.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for your participation. Tons of good questions. And I've personally learned a lot. I hope you all did too.